The sun hammered down on the southern Arizona territory like the fist of an angry god. Here in this crucible of stone and sand, life was measured not in years, but in the minutes between shade and death. The thermometer read 115 degrees, but such numbers meant nothing to the desert. It simply consumed. Kai moved through this furnace like a shadow given flesh. 33 years old, lean as a pronghorn, his body was a map of the frontier, written in scars and sun-darkened skin. His hair, black as obsidian, hung past his shoulders, held back by a strip of red cloth that had once belonged to his wife. In his hands, he carried a Winchester Model 1873, the rifle chambered in 44-40 caliber. The weapon had been his father's, passed down with the weight of expectation and honor. He was Apache. He was alone. And if the desert had its way, he would soon be dead. But first there was the matter of the woman. Kai had found her tracks 3 hours before sunset. At first he thought it was a trap. White men used women as bait, sometimes left them bleeding and screaming to lure warriors into ambush. But these tracks told a different story. They spoke of desperation, not deception. One boot, one bare foot. Drag marks between the steps. Blood that wasn't from a wound you could see, but from something deeper, something that had broken inside. The tracks belonged to someone who weighed maybe 120 pounds, stood about 5'5". A woman clearly, but the pattern of movement was all wrong. She wasn't walking. She was stumbling, crawling, dragging herself forward through sheer force of will. Kai knelt in the sand, reading the story written there. His fingers hovered over the imprints. The bare foot left deeper marks on the inside edge. She couldn't bring her feet together. Something prevented it, pain or injury or both. He looked up at the sky. Storm clouds were building to the west, purple and swollen with violence. In this country, rain didn't come as mercy. It came as flood, washing away tracks, filling arroyos with walls of churning water that could kill a horse and rider in seconds. The decision formed in his chest like a stone. Find her, see what she is, then decide. He rose and began to track, 18 months before Bitter Springs. The memory came unbidden, as it always did. Kai was back there, back in the moment that had split his life in two, before and after. March 1882. He had been 31 years old, tracking an elk through the pine forest 2 miles north of the winter camp at Bitter Springs. The morning air had been crisp, clean, filled with the scent of pine resin and snowmelt. His wife, Morningstar, had kissed him before he left, her lips warm against his cheek. Their daughter, 4 years old, had demanded he bring back the biggest elk in the forest. He had promised he would try. At 5 in the morning, he heard the guns, not the crack of hunting rifles. The deeper, heavier boom of Springfield rifles. Army issue. The sound carried through the still air like thunder, but thunder didn't come in rhythmic volleys. Thunder didn't scream. Kai ran, 2 miles, 47 minutes. Every second was an eternity, every step not fast enough. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he ran like the wind itself, desperate to reach them, knowing in his heart he was already too late. The smoke rose first. Black and oily, the kind that comes from burning canvas and hair and flesh. Then came the silence, worse than the gunfire, heavy as a burial shroud. The winter camp at Bitter Springs had held 63 people. When Kai arrived, 47 were dead. He found Morningstar in the 7th Lodge from the east. She had died with a rifle in her hands, an empty Springfield she must have taken from a fallen soldier. The lodge was burned, the canvas blackened, but her body was untouched by fire. The bullet had taken her in the chest, clean through the heart. She hadn't suffered long. Their daughter lay beside her, curled into her mother's side as if sleeping. But the small chest didn't rise and fall. The dark eyes didn't open. Kai knelt between them. He did not cry. Apache warriors did not weep where enemies might see. But something inside him, something essential, turned to ash as surely as the lodges around him. Later, when he could think again, he searched the dead soldiers. There were 3 of them caught by return fire before the cavalry withdrew. In the coat pocket of a lieutenant, he found something that made his blood freeze. A map, hand-drawn precise, showing the exact layout of Bitter Springs. The lodges, the horse corrals, the best approaches. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was planned. Someone had given the army this information. Who, he never found out. By the time he returned to the survivors, 16 souls huddled in a cave 3 miles distant, the question didn't matter. What mattered was the accusation in their eyes. Grey Wolf, the temporary chieftain, spoke the words that everyone was thinking. You were the eyes of the people, Kai. You were our scout. Why did you not see the blue coats coming? Kai had no answer. He had been hunting. He had been doing his duty providing meat for the tribe. But duty was a cold comfort when children lay dead. You failed us, Grey Wolf said. The spirits have turned from you. Kai did not argue. Perhaps Grey Wolf was right. Perhaps the spirits had abandoned him. He felt their absence like a hollow in his chest where his heart used to beat. He left the survivors that night. Self-imposed exile, the only honorable choice. For 18 months he had wandered the high desert and the low valleys, a ghost among the living, waiting for the courage to join the dead. The woman in the dust, the present crashed back like a wave. Kai stood at the edge of a small canyon, looking down at the crumpled form below. She lay in the shadow of a boulder 50 yards down the slope. From this distance, she looked like discarded rags, a bundle of cloth and despair. But she was breathing. He could see her ribs moving shallow and rapid. Fever breathing, dying breathing. Kai pulled out his spyglass, a battered brass tube he'd taken from a dead cavalry scout years ago. He extended it and brought the woman into focus. White. Young, maybe 25. Blonde hair matted with dust and dry blood. Her dress had once been blue calico, the kind respectable women wore to church. Now it was gray with dirt torn nearly to ribbons below the knee. Her legs. Kai's jaw tightened. Even from this distance, even through the distortion of the cheap glass, he could see the swelling. Her ankles were 3 times their normal size, ringed with something dark. Metal. Iron cuffs still locked on the skin around them, blackened with infection. But it was higher up that made his stomach turn. Her thighs were spread wide, knees forced apart in a position that spoke of violation or restraint or both. She couldn't close them. Even unconscious, even dying. Her body held that terrible posture. Someone had done this to her. Someone had put her in irons and left those irons on until they ate into her flesh. Someone had broken her in ways that went beyond the physical. Kai lowered the spyglass. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. He had seen the cavalry shoot women. He had seen them burn children alive in their lodges. He had seen cruelty that would make the devil weep. But this was different. This was intimate. This was a man, not an army. A man who had looked into this woman's eyes every day and chosen again and again to hurt her. The decision came swift and sure. He would save her, not because she was innocent. Not because she was white or weak or desperate, but because 18 months ago he had failed to save 47 people. Maybe, just maybe, saving one would begin to balance the scales. The storm was minutes away now. He could smell the ozone, sharp and electric. The first drops began to fall, fat and heavy, exploding against the rocks like bullets. Kai slung the Winchester across his back and began to descend. The rescue. By the time he reached her, the rain was falling in sheets. The woman didn't stir when he knelt beside her. Her face was the color of ash, her lips cracked and bleeding. He touched the back of his hand to her forehead. Hot. Far too hot. 104 degrees, maybe higher. Without water and medicine, she had hours at most. He slid one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees. When he lifted, she screamed. The sound tore through the rain, raw and animal. Her eyes flew open and wild, seeing nothing. She thrashed in his arms, her small fists beating against his chest with the strength of pure terror. "Do not touch me," she gasped. "Please, please, no more." Kai held her firmly but carefully, avoiding the worst of her injuries. His voice when he spoke was low and steady. "I am not him. I take you to shelter. You will die here." She focused on his face, then really seeing him for the first time. He watched the fear shift, changing shape. Now she was afraid of him, not as a man, but as an Apache. Her people's stories would have taught her that he was a savage, a killer, something less than human. Let her fear, he thought. Fear keeps people alive. He began to walk. Each step was measured, calculated, to jar her. But even his careful gait couldn't prevent the pain. She bit her lip until it bled, trying not to cry out. He could feel her body rigid in his arms, every muscle locked against the agony. The cave was 300 yards distant. It felt like 300 miles. Thunder rolled across the sky so close, it shook the ground. Lightning split the darkness, turning the world momentarily white. In that flash, Kai saw the alcove ahead, the stone overhang that had been his home for the past 6 days. He ducked inside just as the real deluge began. The rain fell like a solid thing, a gray wall of water that erased the world beyond the cave mouth. Inside it was dry and relatively warm, the stone holding the heat of the day. Kai laid the woman down on the sand floor as gently as he could. She had passed out again, her head lolling to one side. Better. Unconscious, she couldn't fight him while he worked. He built a fire first, small, smokeless, using dry mesquite from his carefully hoarded pile. The flames caught and grew, pushing back the darkness. In the firelight, the extent of her injuries became clear. The iron cuffs around her ankles were homemade, crude things fashioned from what looked like livestock restraints. They had been on long enough that the metal had worn grooves into her skin, deep channels that wept yellow fluid. Infection advanced. The smell was sweet and rotten, the smell of flesh dying while the body still lived. But the cuffs were just the beginning. Higher up on her inner thighs were raw patches where the skin had been scraped away entirely. Not from crawling, from friction, from something rubbing hour after hour, day after day. Kai had seen this before. Not on people, but on horses. When a saddle wasn't fitted right, when the girth was too tight or positioned wrong, it would create these same kinds of sores. Pressure injuries, restraint injuries. Someone had kept her in a device. Something that held her legs apart, prevented them from closing for long enough that her own skin had rubbed itself raw. His hands clenched into fists. He forced them to relax. Anger was useless here. Action was what mattered. He gathered his supplies. Water boiled earlier and cooled in a clay pot. Salt precious and carefully measured. Sage leaves dried and crushed. Spiderwebs gathered from the back of the cave where the stone met the ceiling. Moss from the stream, clean and slightly damp. His mother had been a medicine woman. She had taught him the old ways, the knowledge passed down through generations. How to clean wounds, how to draw out infection, how to help the body remember how to heal. Kai began with the ankles. He poured the salt water over the iron cuffs, washing away the dried blood and pus. The woman stirred but didn't wake. Better. What he had to do next would hurt worse than anything she'd felt so far. The cuffs had no key, no obvious way to open them. They had been riveted shut, meant never to be removed. Kai examined them closely. Crude work. The metal was soft iron, not steel. It would bend. He retrieved a flat stone from outside, heavy and smooth. Then with infinite care, he positioned it against the rivet on the left cuff. He took another stone, smaller and harder, and began to tap. Each tap sent vibrations through the metal into her infected flesh. The woman moaned deep in her unconscious state. Kai ignored it. Mercy sometimes required cruelty. The cuff had to come off or the infection would spread to her blood. And blood infection meant death, and slow and agonizing. Tap, tap, tap. The rivet began to flatten. The cuff loosened just a fraction. Tap, tap. The rivet head sheared off. The cuff fell open. Kai set it aside and looked at what it had hidden. The groove in her ankle was deep enough that he could see bone at the bottom, but the bone looked clean, not infected. Good. He packed the wound with sage and spiderweb, then wrapped it with strips of cloth torn from his spare shirt. He repeated the process on the right ankle. By the time he finished, sweat was running down his face despite the cooling air. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating hard. Not from exertion, from fury. Whoever did this was not human. Humans had souls. Whatever had done this to her was something else. Something that needed to be put down like a rabid dog. The first night, Kai built up the fire as the temperature dropped. Outside, the storm raged, wind howling through the canyon like the voices of angry spirits. Inside the cave was a pocket of warmth and flickering light. The woman slept, not peacefully. Her sleep was troubled, full of small movements and whispered words. Once she cried out a name. Lily. Over and over, Lily. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Kai sat cross-legged by the fire, cleaning his rifle. The familiar motion was soothing, almost meditative. Remove the magazine. Check each cartridge. Wipe down the barrel with an oiled cloth. Reassemble. Load. Ready. He had 43 rounds left. Enough for a fight if it came to that. And it would come. Men who did what had been done to this woman didn't let their property escape without pursuit. Near midnight she woke. Her eyes opened suddenly, fully, the way prey animals wake when they sense danger. She saw the cave sealing the fire, and then she saw Kai. She screamed. It was a short scream cut off when her throat seized. She tried to scramble backward, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The pain hit her like a physical blow. She gasped, her face going white, and collapsed back onto the sand. Kai set down the rifle. He held up both hands, palms out, showing her he held no weapon. His voice was calm, neutral. "I will not hurt you. You are safe here." She stared at him, chest heaving. Her eyes were blue, he noticed. Very blue, like the sky before a storm. And in those eyes was a terror so deep it had no bottom. Where she managed. "Where am I, Stone Canyon? 10 miles south of San Cristobal. You were dying. I brought you here. She stopped. Her gaze traveled over him, taking in the long black hair, the red cloth, the buckskin shirt. "Apache," she whispered. "Yes. Why did you save me?" The question hung in the air between them. Kai considered it. Why had he saved her? Because he needed to save someone. Because he was tired of being the man who arrived too late. Because looking at her broken body reminded him of his own broken soul. But he said none of this. Instead, he said simply, "Because you were dying." She studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied something, because the terror in her eyes receded slightly. "Not gone. Just banked, held in reserve." "My name is Sarah," she said. Sarah Whitmore. Kai. Just Kai. She tried to sit up. The movement pulled at her injuries and she cried out, falling back. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't move." "I can't." "Do not move," Kai said. "Rest. Tomorrow we work on healing." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm not broken, Mr. Kai. I'm destroyed. You are alive," he said flatly. "Alive can be fixed." She turned her face away from him toward the cave wall. When she spoke again, her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. "He kept me in chains, in the barn, like an animal, for 3 weeks. Who? My husband." Kai went very still. Husband, the word tasted like ash. Among his people, a husband was a protector, a partner. This man was neither. This man was an enemy. "What is his name?" Kai asked. "Because when I meet him," Kai said, his voice flat and cold, "I will kill him." Sarah's eyes widened. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the exaggeration. She found only truth. "His name is Clayton Gable," she whispered, "and he's looking for me." The first week, the storm lasted 3 days. In that time, Kai kept the fire going, kept Sarah warm and fed. He made broth from rabbit, rich and salty, and spooned it into her mouth when she was too weak to hold the cup. He changed her bandages twice a day, cleaning the wounds with salt water and fresh sage. The infection fought back. On the second day, her fever spiked to 105. She thrashed and moaned, lost in delirium. Kai packed her in wet cloths, trying to bring the temperature down. He made tea from willow bark, the same tea his mother had used to fight fever. The bark contained a medicine, though he didn't know its name. Salicin, the white doctors called it, the precursor to aspirin. On the third day, the fever broke. Sarah woke clear-eyed for the first time since he'd found her. She was weak as a newborn, but her mind was her own again. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life." Kai nodded. "Now," he said, "we save your legs." He explained the exercises, simple in concept, brutal in execution. She had to straighten her legs, fight against the contractures that had formed in her muscles. The weeks and restraints had taught her body a terrible new normal. Her hip flexors, her adductors, all the muscles of her inner thighs had shortened, locked in that spread position. If she wanted to walk again, she had to stretch them. Slowly, painfully, every day. The first attempt lasted 30 seconds. Kai placed his hand on her knee and gently, carefully pushed her legs straight. She screamed. The sound echoed off the cave walls, merged with the dying storm outside. After 30 seconds, he let her rest. Tomorrow, he said, 1 minute. By the end of the week, she could hold the position for 5 minutes. Progress measured in seconds and tears, but progress nonetheless. In the evenings, they talked, or rather, Sarah talked. Kai listened. She told him about Missouri, about growing up in St. Louis, where the air smelled like coal smoke and the river ran brown. About her father, a stern man who believed daughters were currency to be traded for advantage. About the arrangement he'd made with Clayton Gable, a wealthy rancher 20 years her senior. She had been 22. Clayton had seemed respectable. Successful, a good match. The first 6 months were bearable, she said, staring into the fire. He was controlling, but I thought that was just how husbands were. He decided what I wore, what I ate, who I could talk to. But he wasn't violent. Not then. What changed, Kai asked. I got pregnant. She told him about the baby. A girl they would have named her Lily. The pregnancy had been difficult, the labor worse. 3 days of agony while Clayton refused to send for a doctor. Women have been birthing in fields since Eve, he'd said. You're just being weak. Lily was born silent, blue, already gone, and Sarah had torn, badly, the kind of injury that required surgery stitches, weeks of bed rest. But there was no doctor, no help. Just Clayton angry that his wife had failed to give him a son. The infection that followed nearly killed her. For weeks she couldn't walk without bleeding, couldn't sit without pain. The damage to her pelvic floor, to the delicate structures inside, was severe. When Clayton came to her bed 6 months later, expecting his rights as a husband, she couldn't. The pain was too great. She refused him. That was when he changed, Sarah said. That was when I saw what he really was. He called her broken stock, defective goods. He said if she was going to act like an animal, he'd treat her like one. The barn, the chains, the spreader bar, a cruel device of his own invention designed to keep her legs forced apart. Punishment, he said. So you remember your place. 3 weeks, 21 days of lying in filth, unable to move the iron eating into her flesh with every breath. Then Silas Clayton's foreman got drunk, forgot to lock the door. Sarah found a rusty file in the dirt. 8 hours of sawing through metal while blood ran down her hands. Freedom at 3 in the morning, wearing nothing but her ruined dress. And 3 days of crawling through the desert, waiting to die. Kai listened to all of this without speaking. When she finished, he stood and walked to the mouth of the cave. The storm had passed. The stars were out hard and bright in the clean air. He stood there for a long time, looking at the night. When he came back, his face was set like stone. Clayton Gable, he said, is a dead man walking. He just doesn't know it yet. The 10th day. On the morning of the 10th day, Sarah stood. Not for long, not well. But she stood, her legs shaking, sweat beading on her forehead. She took one step, then another, then a third before her legs buckled and Kai caught her. He lowered her gently to the ground. She was crying, but this time the tears were from joy. I did it, she gasped. I walked. Tomorrow, Kai said, 10 steps. That afternoon, he taught her to shoot. The Winchester was too heavy, too long for her weakened state. But Kai had a backup weapon, a Colt .45 revolver he had taken from a dead soldier at Bitter Springs. He showed her how to hold it, how to aim, how to control the kick. She fired 6 shots, missed 5 times. The 6th hit a prickly pear cactus 30 yards away, exploding the pad in a spray of green pulp. Good, Kai said. Again. They practiced until the sun began to set. By then she was hitting the target 3 times out of 6. Not great, but enough to maybe save her life if it came to that. As the light faded, Kai climbed to the canyon rim. He took the spyglass and scanned the horizon. Nothing to the south, nothing to the east. To the west, the sun was a ball of red fire sinking into the desert. And to the north, 2 miles distant, he saw them. 5 riders, moving in a search pattern, spreading out and then converging, checking every arroyo and draw. They had dogs. He could see them, small, dark shapes ranging ahead of the horses. Clayton's posse. Kai watched them for 10 minutes. They were good, methodical, covering ground efficiently. At this rate, they'd reach the canyon by tomorrow afternoon. He descended back to the cave. Sarah looked up as he entered, saw something in his face. What is it? They're coming. Kai said, 2 miles out, maybe less. We have to move. Sarah's face went white. Can we fight them? Kai shook his head. 5 men, high ground, rifles. We run or we die. He began to pack immediately. Water in 2 canteens, food enough pemmican for 3 days, ammunition every round he had, medical supplies. His hands moved quickly, efficiently, the result of a lifetime spent ready to flee at a moment's notice. Sarah tried to stand and fell. Kai caught her, helped her up. She looked at him with desperate eyes. I can't run. I can barely walk. You don't have to run, he said. I have a horse. He led her outside to where a gray wind waited. The Mustang was small, compact, with zebra stripes on her legs and an intelligent eye. Kai had stolen her from a cavalry outpost 6 months ago. She was worth more than gold. Getting Sarah into the saddle was agony. She bit through her lip to keep from screaming as her legs spread to accommodate the horse's barrel. Blood ran down her chin. Kai swung up behind her, took the reins. "Where are we going?" Sarah gasped. "North," he said. "To the mountains. To the only place Clayton Gable won't follow." "Where's that?" "The Apache camp of Nana, where even white men fear to tread." He kicked Gray Wind into motion. The mare moved out at a smooth walk, heading up canyon away from the approaching posse. Behind them, the cave mouth stood empty. The fire was dead, the supplies gone. In a few hours, when Clayton's men arrived, they would find nothing but ash and silence. And by then, Kai and Sarah would be ghosts in the high country, running toward a confrontation that would end in blood or redemption. Or both. The flight north. The terrain changed as they climbed. The desert floor, with its scorched alkali and skeletal mesquite, gave way to rolling badlands studded with juniper and scrub oak. The air grew thinner, cooler. Gray Wind picked her way up the rocky slopes with the sure-footedness of a mountain goat, but even she couldn't make the journey painless. Sarah bit her lip until it bled, trying not to cry out. Every jolt sent fire through her healing wounds. But she didn't complain. Kai noticed this, noticed and respected Imad. Pain was a language he understood, and she was learning to speak it with dignity. They rode through the afternoon, stopping only to water the horse and adjust Sarah's position when the cramping in her legs became unbearable. Kai walked ahead, leading Gray Wind by the hackamore, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain, reading the land the way a sailor reads the sea. At dusk, they reached a narrow canyon choked with boulders. Kai stopped, held up his hand for silence. He stood motionless for 3 minutes, listening. The wind carried sounds from far away, a dog barking, the faint jingle of tack and bit. The posse was closer than he'd thought. He turned Gray Wind into a tight side canyon, barely wide enough for the horse. The walls rose 50 feet on either side, blocking out the dying light. At the end, hidden behind a tumble of fallen rock, was a small clearing. Protected, invisible from above. "We stop here," Kai said. "No fire tonight." Sarah slid from the saddle with his help. Her legs buckled immediately. She sat hard in the dust, shaking. "How close are they?" "Close enough to hear if we make noise. Far enough that they won't find us if we're quiet." He unsaddled Gray Wind, rubbed her down with handfuls of dry grass. The mare was lathered with sweat, her sides heaving. She'd carried double all day without complaint. Good horse. Worth more than gold, worth more than his own life, perhaps. They ate in silence. Pemmican hard as leather, washed down with water that tasted of canteen metal. Sarah chewed mechanically, swallowed without tasting. Her eyes were distant, turned inward. "You're thinking about him," Kai said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know your jaw gets tight? Like you're bracing for a blow." Sarah touched her face, surprised. "I didn't realize." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I keep thinking I'll wake up and still be in the barn, that this is a dream and he's about to come through the door." "He's not here," Kai said. "And if he comes, I will stop him." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I have nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in the desert." The canyon ambush. Morning came cold and gray. Kai woke before dawn, as he always did. Years of survival had trained his body to rise with the first hint of light. He lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of the desert waking. Somewhere a coyote yipped. Higher up, a hawk screamed its hunting cry. And from the south, barely audible, came the sound of horses. He was on his feet in seconds, rifle in hand. He climbed to a vantage point 20 feet above their camp, moving silent as smoke. From here, he could see back down the main canyon the way they'd come. 6 riders now, one more than yesterday. Kai pulled out the spyglass, brought them into focus. 5 hired guns, hard-faced men with the look of professional killers, and one tall figure in a black duster coat riding a gray horse. Even at this distance, Kai could see the arrogance in the way he sat the saddle. This would be Clayton Gable, the man who had chained Sarah like livestock, the man who needed to die. Kai watched them for 5 minutes. They were following the trail, slow but methodical. The dogs had the scent. Within 2 hours, maybe 3, they'd reached this side canyon. He descended quickly. Sarah was awake, her eyes wide with fear. She'd heard the horses too. "How many?" she asked. 6, including your husband." He saw her flinch at the word husband. Good. Clayton Gable had forfeited any right to that title the moment he'd put her in chains. "Can we outrun them?" Sarah asked. Kai shook his head. "Not with you on the horse and me walking. They'll catch us in open country. We need to slow them down. How I make them cautious. He explained his plan while saddling Grey Wind. Sarah would go ahead following the canyon north for 2 miles, then wait at a specific landmark. Kai would stay behind, set an ambush. Not to kill, that would only make them more determined, but to make them think twice about rushing in. You're going to fight 6 men alone. Sarah's voice was tight. I'm going to fight 6 horses, Kai corrected. Without mounts, they slow down. Gives us time. He helped her onto Grey Wind, checked the cinch twice. When he handed her the colt, their hands touched. He looked into her eyes and saw not fear now, but something else. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. 2 miles, he said. Wait for me. If I don't come by noon, keep going north. You'll come, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. He watched her ride away the horse, picking a careful path through the boulder field. Then he turned his attention to the matter at hand. The canyon narrowed to a bottleneck about 300 yards south. Perfect. Kai positioned himself on an outcrop overlooking the choke point. He had a clear field of fire, good cover, and 3 escape routes if it went wrong. He loaded the Winchester, 14 rounds in the tube magazine. More than enough. He wasn't planning to start a war, just send a message. The wait was the hardest part. Kai had learned patience in the hard school of hunting, where a man could sit motionless for 6 hours waiting for a deer to step into range. But this was different. This was hunting men, and men could think, could plan, could hunt back. The sound of hooves on stone announced them. The dogs came first, 3 gaunt hounds with their noses to the ground. Then the riders strung out in single file because the canyon was too narrow for anything else. Kai let them get halfway through the bottleneck. Then he aimed not at the men but at the lead horse and fired. The Winchester barked once. The horse screamed a sound like tearing metal and went down. Its rider, the man Kai recognized as Silas from Sarah's description, barely managed to roll clear before 500 pounds of thrashing horseflesh crashed into the canyon wall. Chaos erupted. The other horses reared and plunged. Men shouted. Someone fired a wild shot that ricocheted off stone 50 feet from Kai's position. He fired twice more. Both shots hit stone directly over the riders' heads, showering them with rock chips and dust. Then he was moving, sliding down the backside of his outcrop, running low and fast through a maze of boulders that he'd scouted earlier. Behind him, he heard Clayton's voice bellowing orders. That savage bastard, I want him alive. You hear me? I'll skin him and wear his hide. The man's rage carried clearly in the thin air. Good. Angry men made mistakes. Kai ran for half a mile, then doubled back, circling wide. By the time he reached the spot where Sarah waited, his breathing was steady and his hands were calm. The brief firefight had cost him 3 bullets and bought them maybe 4 hours. It would have to be enough. The decision, they rode hard for the rest of the morning, pushing Grey Wind to her limits. The terrain grew rougher, steeper. Ponderosa pines appeared, their bark puzzle pieced and orange in the strengthening light. The air smelled of resin and altitude. Sarah clung to the saddle horn, her knuckles white. She'd stopped trying to hide her pain. Every step the horse took was agony, but she endured. Kai walked beside her, one hand on Grey Wind's neck, feeling the mare's exhaustion through his palm. At noon, they stopped to rest. Sarah slid from the saddle and immediately collapsed. Her legs had locked up, the muscles cramping so badly she couldn't straighten them. Kai knelt and began to massage her calves, working the knots with strong, sure hands. She gasped at first, then relaxed slightly as the cramping eased. This was not the first time he'd touched her therapeutically. Over the past 10 days, his hands had cleaned her wounds, stretched her muscles, held her when she was too weak to stand. There was nothing romantic in it, only necessity, but something had changed between them. Some barrier had fallen. When his hands moved to her thighs, kneading the locked muscles there, she didn't flinch. Didn't pull away, just closed her eyes and breathed through the pain. Thank you, she said when he finished. For everything. Kai stood, wiped his hands on his buckskins. We need to reach San Cristobal by nightfall. You need a real doctor. The infection is coming back. He'd noticed it that morning, the faint, sweet smell from her bandages, the slight warmth returning to her skin. Willow bark and sage could only do so much. She needed modern medicine. Antibiotics, though they didn't call it that yet. Quinine, perhaps. Or carbolic acid for cleaning. But San Cristobal meant people. And people meant danger of a different kind. The town, they reached the outskirts of San Cristobal as the sun touched the western mountains. The town was small, maybe 400 souls clinging to a bend in the Purgatoire River like a tick on a dog's back. One main street rutted deep by wagon wheels, a whitewashed church with a leaning steeple, a saloon from which piano music drifted tinny and off-key, the smell of coal smoke and unwashed humanity. Kai stopped Graywin in a grove of cottonwoods half a mile from the nearest building. He helped Sarah down, steady to her when she swayed. "I can't go in there," he said. "Apache in a white town means a rope or a bullet. You have to go alone." Sarah's eyes widened. "But I don't know anyone. What do I say? Tell them you were attacked by bandits, lost in the desert, found your way here. Nothing about me." He pressed $20 into her hand. All the money he had in the world taken from the pockets of dead soldiers over the past year. "Find Dr. Vance. Office is on the Main Street East Side. He's a drunk, but his hands are steady. Get medicine. Come back before dark. And if they don't let me leave," Kai's jaw tightened, "then I come get you, and I burn that town to ash." It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact delivered in the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then, surprising them both, she reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the scar that ran through his left eyebrow. "I'll come back," she said. "I promise. See that you do." He watched her walk toward town, limping heavily, but moving under her own power. She'd come so far. 10 days ago, she couldn't stand. Now she could walk half a mile. The human capacity for healing, given time and care, was remarkable. Kai settled into the shadows to wait. The Winchester rested across his knees. The Colt was tucked into his belt, loaded and ready. If anyone tried to take Sarah, if anyone tried to hurt her, they'd learn what it meant to make an enemy of the desert. The doctor and the sheriff. Sarah made her way down the main street of San Cristobal, acutely aware of the stairs. People turned to look as she passed. A woman in a bonnet whispered to her companion. A man, loading a wagon, stopped mid-motion, his mouth hanging open. She knew what they saw. A scarecrow in a ruined dress, limping like a cripple, face burned dark by the sun. Not the respectable Eastern lady she'd once been. Something else now. Something broken and remade. The doctor's office was where Kai said it would be. A small, clapboard building with a dust-caked window and a sign that read, "Der Avery Vance, Physician and Surgeon." She pushed through the door. The man behind the desk looked up. He was perhaps 50, with a face mapped in broken capillaries and eyes that had seen too much frontier suffering. He wore a stained waistcoat and smelled faintly of whiskey. "Help you, miss, I need medicine," Sarah said. Her voice came out hoarse, barely recognizable. "For infection." Vance came around the desk. His eyes went immediately to her gait, the way she held her legs apart. Without speaking, he gestured to the examination table in the back room. "Let's have a look." The examination was clinical professional, but Sarah still had to fight the urge to flee. Every touch, even a doctor's careful hands, brought back memories of the barn, of Clayton, of pain. But Vance's expression when he saw the damage told her everything. His face went gray. He sat back heavily on his stool. "Christ almighty," he breathed. "Who did this to you, my husband?" "Clayton Gable." The name meant something. Vance's expression shifted, became guarded. "Gable's a big man around here. Provides beef for the reservation." "The law won't help you. I'm not asking for the law," Sarah said. "Just medicine." Vance nodded slowly. He went to a cabinet, pulled out bottles and tins. Arnica salve for the wounds, laudanum for pain, quinine powder for infection. He wrapped them carefully, handed them over. "These will help, but you need rest. Real rest. Months of it." Sarah took the package. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing." Vance's voice was rough. "Can't charge a woman for trying to stay alive." She left through the back door, not wanting to walk the main street again. But she'd only gone 3 blocks when a voice stopped her. "Well now, if it ain't the runaway wife." Sarah turned. A man stood blocking the alley. He wore a tin star pinned to a greasy vest. Sheriff Miller, if the local gossip she'd overheard was accurate. "I'm just passing through, Sheriff." Miller spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Heard different. Heard you ran off from your husband. Man's got rights, you know. Wife's supposed to stay put. Even when he chains her in a barn." Miller's eyes narrowed. "That's a mighty serious accusation." "You got proof." Sarah pulled up her skirt. Showed him her ankles. The scars were livid, impossible to mistake for anything but what they were. Miller looked, then looked away. His face hardened. Gable says you're hysterical. Says you lost a baby and it made you crazy. And I heard rumors about tracks. Apache tracks. The word hung in the air like a noose. If you've been spreading your legs for a redskin, Miller continued, then Gable was right to discipline you. That ain't just running away. That's treason against your race. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. She backed away slowly. I haven't done anything wrong. Get out of my town, Miller said. And if I were you, I'd go back to your husband. Beg his forgiveness. It's the only way you're getting out of this alive. Sarah turned and ran. Ruth, she was lost within 5 minutes. The back alleys of San Cristobal twisted and doubled back on themselves. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She stumbled into a small square near the river and collapsed against a wall, gasping. Child, Sarah looked up. A woman stood in the doorway of a ramshackle hut. She was perhaps 40, with skin the color of coffee with cream and hair streaked with gray. Mexican, maybe, or mestizo. The kind of person who lived in the cracks between worlds. You're in trouble, the woman said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Come inside, before they see you. The hut was small but clean. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters. A small fire burned in a corner fireplace. The woman ladled water from a bucket, handed Sarah a cup. My name is Ruth Morningside, and you're Clayton Gable's wife. Sarah's hands shook, spilling water. How did you know I see things? Ruth smiled slightly. People call me witch. Maybe they're right. She studied Sarah with dark, intelligent eyes. I saw you with the sheriff. I saw you with the preacher before that. They won't help you. To them, you're contaminated. Sarah set down the cup. Because they think I was with an Apache. Were ya? Yes. She said it clearly without shame. He saved my life. Cared for me when no one else would. Ruth nodded, unsurprised. Your Apache friend is waiting in the cottonwoods by the North Road. I saw smoke from his fire this morning. Sarah stared. You saw us. I see everything. Ruth moved to the window, looked out at the darkening street. And right now I see Clayton Gable buying drinks at the saloon, telling everyone about his kidnapped wife, offering $500 to the man who brings you back. 500. A fortune. Enough to make every man in town turn hunter. You need to leave, Ruth said. Tonight. Before he organizes a proper search. Where can we go north? To the high mountains. To the Apache camps where even white law doesn't reach. Ruth pulled out a small cloth bag, pressed it into Sarah's hands. Seeds. Corn, beans, squash. For when you find a place to plant. Sarah's eyes burned with sudden tears. Why are you helping me? Because I know what it's like to be cast out. Ruth's voice was soft. My father was Macero. My mother was Mexican. Nobody wanted me. I live here on the edge because it's the only place they let me be. She walked Sarah to the back door pointed north. Follow the river for a mile. Your man is waiting. And Sarah, she paused. He's a good one. I can see it in his eyes. Don't let him go. The night flight Kai saw her coming from 100 yards away. He was on his feet instantly, rifle ready, scanning for pursuit. But Sarah was alone, running awkwardly but moving fast. She stumbled into the cottonwood grove and he caught her. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her face was pale in the twilight. They know she managed. Clayton's here. In town. He's offering money. They're organizing a posse for dawn. Kai's mind raced through options. They couldn't stay here. Couldn't go back. The only path was forward into the high country where even gold couldn't buy men's courage. We ride now, he said, before the moon rises. He saddled Gray Wind in darkness, working by touch. Every movement was precise, economical. Survival had taught him that wasted motion in a crisis could mean death. Sarah mounted with his help. He swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to steady her. Gray Wind shifted under the double weight but didn't protest. Good mare. She understood urgency. They moved out at a walk heading north. Behind them, the lights of San Cristobal glittered like scattered embers. Ahead, the mountains rose black against the sky, just beginning to show stars. Kai set a brutal pace. Not running, which would exhaust the horse, but a steady, fast walk that 8 miles. Sarah leaned back against his chest, trusting him to hold her upright. He could feel her heart beating through the thin fabric of her dress. After 2 hours, she spoke. Where exactly are we going to find Nana? He's the leader of a small band, last free Apache in these mountains. Will he help us? Kai was silent for a long moment. No, he hates me. Thinks I'm a coward who let his family die. Then why are we going there? Because when Clayton comes, and he will come, I need witnesses. I need the people to see who attacks first, who brings violence to a peaceful camp. Understanding dawned in Sarah's voice. You're going to make him show his true nature. Yes. And if it gets us killed, Kai's arm tightened slightly around her waist. Then we die together, which is better than dying alone. They rode on through the darkness, two fugitives racing toward a confrontation that would end in blood or vindication. Behind them in San Cristobal, Clayton Gable was gathering his forces, sharpening his knives, feeding his rage. The chase was on. The high country dawn found them in the foothills climbing steadily. The landscape had transformed. Gone were the cactus and creosote of the lowlands. Here, juniper and pinyon dotted the slopes. Higher still, the first ponderosa pines appeared their bark like pieces of a giant puzzle. Gray Wind's breathing came harder now. The altitude was telling the air thinner. Kai dismounted, led the horse to spare her the extra weight. Sarah stayed in the saddle, clinging to the horn as the trail grew steeper. At mid-morning, they stopped to rest. Kai unsaddled the mare, rubbed her down. Sarah tried to stand, collapsed. Her legs had cramped again, locked at that terrible angle. While Kai worked the knots from her muscles, she asked the question that had been building. Tell me about Nana. What kind of man is he? Old Kai said. 70 winters or more. He fought the Spanish, the Mexicans, the Americans. Survived them all. He's the last of the war chiefs who remember when the land was ours. Will he listen to you, maybe? Kai's hands moved steadily, pressing deep into the locked muscle. If I speak well, if I offer the right gifts, what gifts do we have? The truth. Sometimes that's worth more than gold. They ate pemmican and drank from a stream so cold it made their teeth ache. The water tasted of stone and snow, pure and ancient. Above them a hawk circled, riding the thermals. Higher, always higher. The trail wound through boulder fields and across scree slopes where one misstep meant a fatal fall. Kai led Gray Wind with infinite patience, testing each step before committing. At dusk, they encountered the wolves. 7 of them, gray ghosts among the pines. They appeared without sound, materializing from the shadows. The pack alpha, a massive male with amber eyes, stood directly in the path. Gray Wind snorted, danced sideways. Kai held the hackamore steady, spoke soft words in Apache. The mare calmed, but her eyes showed white. Sarah drew the colt with shaking hands. Kai raised his hand, stopping her. No. You shoot one, the pack attacks. Put it away. He picked up a fallen branch, wrapped a strip of cloth soaked in pitch around one bone end. From his possible bag, he took a friction match, one of 3 he had left. The match flared. The torch caught, burning bright. Kai held the torch high and stepped forward. The wolves, creatures of instinct, saw fire and thought lightning, thought danger. But they didn't retreat. Not yet. The alpha growled a sound like distant thunder. Kai spread his arms wide, the torch in one hand, his skinning knife in the other. Then he opened his mouth and screamed. It was not a human sound. It was the war cry of the Apache, a ululating shriek that echoed off the canyon walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once, the sound of a predator, not prey. The alpha's ears flattened. For 5 heartbeats, the confrontation hung in balance. Then the wolf turned and loped into the darkness. The pack followed, flowing like smoke between the trees. Kai lowered his arms. The torch guttered in the wind. Have you done that before? Sarah's voice shook. 3 times. Twice it worked. And the 3rd time I still have the scars. Dawn on the mountain, they reached the high pass as the first light touched the eastern sky. Kai stopped, let Sarah dismount. Together they stood at 7,000 feet, looking back the way they'd come. Below, the desert spread like a rumpled blanket, brown and gold and infinite. They could see for 100 miles. See the heat shimmer already rising. See the dark line of the river. See, if they looked carefully, the tiny cluster of buildings that was San Cristobal. And they could see the dust, a column of it rising from the desert floor, moving fast, heading toward the mountains. How many? Sarah asked. Kai studied the dust cloud. At least 6, maybe 7. They're pushing hard. How long until they reach us? Half a day, maybe less. Sarah turned to him. Her face was drawn, exhausted, but there was steel in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there 10 days ago. Whatever happens, she said, I'm not going back. I know. If they take me, if you can't stop them, promise me something. Kai looked at her. Promise you'll kill me first. Quick and clean. I won't go back to that barn. I'd rather be dead. The words hung between them, stark and terrible. Kai reached out, touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. You won't have to choose, he said, because I won't let them take you. I'll stand between you and every man in that posse. I'll fight until I have no bullets, no strength, no breath. And when I fall, if I fall, you'll still be free. How can you promise that? Because 18 months ago, I failed to save the people I loved. I watched them die because I was too far away too late. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. I won't be too late again. Sarah leaned forward, rested her forehead against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, two damaged souls finding strength in each other's presence. Then Kai stepped back. We have to move. The Apache camp is 3 hours from here. They mounted again, turned north. The high peaks rose before them, still capped with snow, even in late summer. Somewhere up there, hidden in a granite bowl, was Nana's camp. And somewhere behind them, Clayton Gable rode with murder in his heart. The confrontation was coming. Blood would be spilled. Questions would be answered. But first, they had to survive the next 3 hours. The granite bowl, they found the camp just before noon. It was hidden in a natural amphitheater of stone, the wall rising 200 feet on 3 sides. A perfect fortress. The only approach was through a narrow gap barely wide enough for a horse. 12 wickiups clustered around small fires. Women worked at grinding stones. Children played with rawhide balls. Old men sat in the shade smoking and talking in the ancient language. And at the edge of the camp, 5 warriors stood with rifles, watching Kai's approach with hard eyes. He raised his right hand palm forward, the sign of peace. Then he dismounted, helped Sarah down. Together they walked toward the camp, moving slow and steady, no sudden movements, no threats. An old man emerged from the largest wickiup. He was stick-thin, bent with age, but his eyes were sharp as obsidian blades. He carried an old Sharps rifle, the kind buffalo hunters used. One shot could drop a man at 800 yards. Kai, he said, his voice was dry leaves scraping stone. The man who let his family burn. You dare come here, I seek shelter. Grandfather, for one night, for her. Kai gestured to Sarah. Nana's gaze moved to Shura, took in the scars visible on her ankles the way she stood. A white woman, you bring poison to us. She is hunted by evil men, the same men who burn villages and kill children. Then let them have her. Why should we die for white skin? A younger warrior stepped forward. Tarek, perhaps 26, with the lean build of a runner. This is the coward from Bitter Springs. He hid while his people died. Tarek raised his rifle, pointed it at Kai's chest. Leave or I shoot. Kai didn't move, didn't flinch. He looked Tarek in the eye and spoke quietly. Then shoot. But know this. When you kill me, you become like the blue-coat soldiers. You kill a man who came in peace. The rifle trembled slightly in Tarek's hands. Nana held up one gnarled hand. Enough. The old man studied Kai for a long moment. Then his gaze went to Sarah, lingering on her scars. Finally, he spoke. One night. Because your father was a great man, Kai. Not because of you. He pointed to the far edge of camp. You stay there. Away from the people. If she brings trouble, both of you die. Kai bowed his head. Thank you, grandfather. Do not thank me. Nana's voice was hard. Survive the night. We then go. They were given no shelter, no food, no welcome. Kai built a small lean-to from pine branches, while Sarah sat in the shade watching. The people of the camp watched too, their faces closed hostile. A child threw a rock. It struck Sarah's shoulder, sharp and stinging. She flinched but didn't cry out. Kai turned to saw the child, saw the mother holding another rock ready to throw. He walked over, stood between Sarah and the woman, said nothing, just stood there, solid as stone. After a moment, the woman lowered her arm. She spat in the dirt at his feet, then turned away. They hate me, Sarah whispered when Kai returned. They want me dead. They fear you, Kai corrected. You remind them of everything they've lost. That night, they huddled together under the buffalo robe. The temperature had dropped to near freezing. Sarah shivered despite the fur. Kai's arm was around her shoulders, his body heat all that kept her from hypothermia. She could feel his heart beating. Slow, steady, unafraid. "Why are you doing this?" she asked into the darkness. "Why risk everything for me?" Kai was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, "Because I already died once. 18 months ago when Morningstar and my daughter died, I died too. I kept breathing, kept walking, but I was dead inside." He paused. "You brought me back. You gave me something to protect, something to fight for. Now I live for you." Sarah turned in his arms, looked up at his face in the starlight. "Don't die for me. I already died. Died once," Kai repeated. "You brought me back to life. Now I live for you." She kissed him then, not from passion, though passion was there, but from something deeper, recognition. Two broken souls finding each other in the darkness, finding home. When they finally slept, they slept as one, wrapped together against the cold and the hatred and the coming storm. Tomorrow Clayton would arrive. Tomorrow blood would be spilled. But tonight they had each other. And that was enough. The burst of voice from the rim. The afternoon sun beat down on the granite bowl with merciless intensity. Sarah sat in the shade of the lean to shelling beans into a borrowed clay pot. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind wandered elsewhere. To Missouri, to the barn, to the strange, impossible journey that had brought her to this hostile place. The shout came without warning. "Hey!" The voice boomed down from the canyon rim, amplified by the natural acoustics of stone. Sarah's hands froze. She knew that voice, had heard it whisper endearments and scream obscenities, had learned to gauge her safety by its tone. Clayton. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Women grabbed children and pulled them toward the wickiups. Warriors seized rifles and took cover behind boulders. Nana emerged from his lodge, moving with surprising speed for a man of 70 winters. Kai was beside Sarah in seconds, his Winchester in hand. He pushed her behind a large rock, pressed the Colt into her palm. "Stay down. Do not move." On the rim above, silhouettes appeared against the sky. 7 men on horseback, backlit by the sun, so they looked like shadows given form. "I know you're down there," Clayton's voice carried clearly. "I want my wife. Send her up and we leave you be. Keep her, and we come down there and kill every last one of you." Tarak turned on Kai, his face twisted with rage. "Give her to them. Why should we die for a white woman?" He raised his rifle, pointing it not at the rim but at Sarah. Kai stepped between them, the barrel of Tarak's gun pressed against his chest. "You want to shoot?" Kai's voice was quiet, deadly. "Shoot me first." Tarak's finger trembled on the trigger. His eyes burned with fury and fear in equal measure. For 3 heartbeats, death hung in the balance. Then a shot rang out from the rim, not aimed at anyone. A warning shot that kicked up dirt near Nana's feet. The old man didn't flinch. He simply raised his own rifle, ancient sharps that looked older than he was, and fired back. The boom of the buffalo gun echoed like thunder. The bullet struck stone 2 feet from where Clayton sat, his horse showering him with rock chips. And just like that, the shooting started. The battle, the Apache warriors, outnumbered but protected by stone and fury, returned fire with disciplined precision. They didn't waste ammunition on wild shots. Each trigger pull was calculated, aimed. Kai knelt behind the boulder Sarah pressed against his back. He brought the Winchester to his shoulder, sighted carefully. His first shot took a horse in the haunch, not to kill the animal, but to wound it enough that its rider would be thrown. The horse screamed and reared. Its rider, a hard-faced man in a canvas duster, barely managed to roll clear before 500 pounds of panicked horseflesh crashed into the canyon wall. Return fire came fast and heavy. The posse had better weapons, newer rifles. 2 of them carried Sharp's buffalo guns that could kill at 800 yards. Bullets whined off stone, filled the air with chips and dust. Sarah covered her ears against the noise. The world had become chaos, sound, and terror. She wanted to run, to hide, to wake up from this nightmare. But there was nowhere to run. The granite bowl was a fortress, yes, but it was also a trap. Kai fired again. This time he aimed high, deliberately missing. He didn't want to kill these men. Killing would only fuel more killing, but he needed to slow them down, make them cautious. The posse began to descend. They came down the steep trail, single file, using their horses as shields. Clayton led the way, his face red with rage and exertion. 50 yards from the camp floor, then 40, then 30. Tarak, lying behind a rock to Kai's left, took a hit. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down hard, his rifle clattering on stone. Blood spread quickly across his shirt. Kai didn't hesitate. He left his position, ran in a crouch to where Tarak lay. The younger warrior's eyes were sundered with his shock and pain. Why, Tarak gasped as Kai dragged him to better cover. Why save me? Kai pulled off his belt, fashioned a quick tourniquet around Tarak's upper arm. Because we are Apache. We do not leave brothers behind. He cinched the belt tight. Tarak cried out, then went silent. His eyes, when they met Kai's, held something new. Not respect, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. 20 yards now. Clayton and his men were almost to the canyon floor. The Apache fire was slackening. 5 warriors against 7 hired guns. The mathematics were not in their favor. Kai returned to Sarah. She looked at him with terrified eyes. We're going to die, aren't we, maybe? Kai checked his ammunition. 4 rounds left in the Winchester. 6 in the Colt. Not enough. Not nearly enough, Sarah, he said quietly. If it comes to it, if they take me down and come for you, use the last bullet on yourself, quick behind the ear. You won't feel anything. She stared at him, nodded once. Her hand tightened on the Colt's grip, but it didn't come to that. Sarah's stand, Clayton reached the canyon floor. He stood there in the open, a big man made bigger by rage, his pistol held ready. Behind him, 6 hired guns spread out in a loose semicircle. Sarah, he bellowed. Get out here, this ends now. Sarah felt something shift inside her, a lifetime of fear, of cowering, of making herself small, all of it compressed into a single bright point of fury. She stood. Kai grabbed for her, but she was already moving, stepping out from behind the boulder into full view. The shooting stopped. Both sides, shocked by her sudden appearance, held their fire. She walked forward. Not fast, not slow. Her limp was pronounced, her legs still unable to come fully together. But she walked like a woman who had made a choice and would not be turned aside. Clayton's face split into a triumphant smile. There you are. Come here, Sarah. Come to me. Sarah stopped 20 feet from him, close enough to see the broken veins in his cheeks, the madness in his eyes. No, the word rang out clear and hard. What did you say? I said no. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I am not your wife. I am not your property. I am not coming back. You'll do as you're told. Clayton took a step toward her. You'll get over here right now or I'll drag you back by your hair. Sarah raised her voice, addressing not just Clayton, but the hired guns, the Apache, the entire world. Look at me. She grabbed her skirt, him lifted it high. Look at what this man did. The scars on her ankles were livid in the harsh sunlight. The marks where iron had eaten flesh, where infection had turned skin black. Undeniable. Unmistakable. He chained me like livestock. Sarah's voice cracked but didn't break. Because I lost our daughter, because my body couldn't heal fast enough for his needs. He put me in a barn and kept me in iron for 3 weeks. One of the hired guns, a grizzled man named Frank, shifted uncomfortably. Boss, he muttered, you said she was crazy. You didn't say nothing about chains. She is crazy. Clayton's face had gone purple. She's spreading lies. These aren't lies. Sarah gestured to her ruined ankles. You can see what he did. All of you can see. Shut your mouth. Clayton raised his pistol, aimed it at Sarah's chest. Sarah stood her ground. If you're going to shoot me, she said quietly, then shoot. At least I'll die free. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Clayton's finger tightened on the trigger. The Shakai was already moving, already throwing himself between Sarah and the gun. But even Apache reflexes couldn't outrun a bullet fired at 20 feet. The shot boomed across the canyon. Kai felt the impact like a hammer blow to his left shoulder. The same shoulder that had been wounded at Bitter Springs. The bullet punched through muscle and sinew, spun him halfway around. He went down hard. Sarah screamed. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands instantly red with his blood. No, 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 no. Kai, stay with me. Clayton advanced, working the hammer back for a second shot. I'll kill you both. I'll bury you in the same hole. The second shot came, but not from Clayton's gun. The boom of the old Sharps rifle split the air. Clayton jerked his eyes, going wide. He looked down at his chest where a red flower was blooming, spreading across his white shirt. He tried to speak. Blood came out instead of words. He took one stumbling step, then pitched forward onto his face, dead before he hit the ground. Nana lowered the sharp smoke curling from its barrel. His face was carved from stone, showing nothing. An enemy came to my home, he said calmly. He threatened my people. I defended. The hired guns looked at Clayton's body, looked at each other, looked at the Apache warriors rising from cover, with rifles ready. Frank spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Boss is dead. We ain't getting paid. He turned his horse, started back up the trail. The others followed. Within 5 minutes the posse was gone, disappearing over the rim like ghosts. Sarah pressed both hands against Kai's shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. The medicine woman, Amma, appeared at her side. Ancient and weathered, she carried a leather pouch of supplies. Move, girl. Let me work. Sarah moved, watched with terrified eyes as Amma cut away Kai's shirt, probed the wound with gnarled fingers. The bullet had gone clean through. Missed the bone, missed the major vessels. Lucky for a man who'd just taken a bullet. Kai's eyes opened. He looked at Sarah, managed a weak smile. You spoke loud. Sarah laughed through her tears. I learned from the best. Acceptance. 2 days passed. Kai lay in the wickiup that Nana had grudgingly provided, drifting in and out of fevered sleep. Sarah sat beside him, changing bandages, spooning broth into his mouth when he could swallow. On the 3rd day, Nana came to visit. The old man sat on the packed earth floor, his ancient bones creaking. He looked at Kai for a long moment without speaking. You fought for the people, he said finally. When the white men came with guns, you stood with us. You saved Tarek. I did what any warrior would do. Nana shook his head. No, many warriors would have run, saved themselves. You stayed. He paused. I was wrong about Bitter Springs. You did not fail your family. You were simply not there. These are different things. He placed a gnarled hand on Kai's good shoulder. Welcome back, brother. After Nana left, Tarek appeared. His own shoulder was wrapped in clean bandages. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, then stepped inside. I owe you a life debt, he said stiffly. You could have let me die. Instead, you saved me. Kai shook his head. We are even. You stood and fought beside me. That is all the payment I need. Tarek nodded, reached into his pouch, and pulled out a bundle wrapped in deerskin. Pemmican. For your journey. Journey, you cannot stay. Tarek's face was somber. Soldiers will come asking about the white man who died. If they find you here, they will burn the camp. You must go. Kai understood. Acceptance came with conditions. Safety required sacrifice. 2 days, Nana had said. Then you leave. The valley. 1 week later, they rode out. Kai's shoulder was healing, the wound clean and closing. He could use his arm, though it ached in the cold morning air. Sarah sat behind him on gray wind, her arms around his waist. The people of the camp had given them gifts. Ammunition from Nana, seeds and medicine from Amma, dried meat from Tarek. Small things but precious. Proof that they were no longer outcasts but something else. Survivors. Allies. They rode north for 5 days, following trails that Kai remembered from his youth. Higher into the mountains where the air grew thin and the pines gave way to spruce and fir, where snow lingered in the shadows even in summer. On the 5th day, they found it. A narrow valley hidden behind a fortress of granite ridges. A cold stream ran through its center, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. The soil was thin but workable. Pine and juniper provided wood for building. Game trails crossed the meadow. It was hard country, unforgiving, but it was hidden, protected, a place where no sheriff's writ would reach. Here, Kai said. Sarah looked around, saw the challenges, the isolation, the brutal winters that would come, but she also saw possibility. Here she agreed. They set to work immediately. The first shelter was crude, a lean-to of pine boughs that barely kept out the rain. But it was theirs. No one could take it from them. Kai, working with one good arm, began to fell trees. Sarah stripped bark, gathered moss for chinking. Her hands, soft when she'd left Missouri, grew calloused and strong. Her body, broken by iron and abuse, found new purpose in labor. The cabin rose slowly, 4 walls of notched logs, each one placed with care. A roof of split cedar, shakes that Kai shaped with patient strokes of his hatchet. A stone fireplace that took a week to build, each rock selected and placed by hand. When the first snow fell, they had walls and a roof and a door that barred from the inside. They had a fire that pushed back the cold. They had each other. One night, lying on their bed of pine needles and buffalo hides, Sarah spoke into the darkness. We did it. We built a home. Kai's arm tightened around her. Yes, but she heard the reservation in his voice. What's wrong? Nothing is permanent. This valley, this cabin, the world can still take it. Soldiers, settlers, disease. 1,000 things can destroy what we've built. Then we'll build again. Sarah turned to face him. That's what survivors do. We keep building. She kissed him then, not the desperate kiss of two people facing death, but something different. The kiss of two people choosing life, choosing each other, choosing tomorrow. The community, they were not alone for long. The frontier was a machine that chewed up people and spat them out. And some of that human wreckage found its way to the hidden valley. The first was a family of 4 traveling in a broken-down wagon pulled by a half-starved mule. Thomas Jefferson was 36, a powerfully built man with skin like polished mahogany and the hands of a craftsman. His wife Grace carried their youngest child, a baby girl named Hope. Their son Samuel, 9 years old, walked beside the wagon. They had been farmers in Kansas until night riders burned them out. Now they were refugees looking for anywhere that would let them exist. Kai met them at the head of the valley, rifle in hand. Thomas raised his empty hands, showing he meant no threat. We're just looking for a place to rest the mule, Thomas said carefully. We ain't trouble. Kai studied them, saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd found a place where the color of their skin didn't mark them for violence. He looked at Sarah. She nodded. There's water by the willows, Kai said, and we have extra corn. You can stay. Thomas's eyes widened. You sure about that? You don't even know us. I know enough. Kai gestured to the valley. This is a place for people who don't fit anywhere else. Seems like you qualify. Thomas smiled for the first time since they'd met. I'm a blacksmith, can forge tools, horseshoes, whatever you need. Then we need you. Kai extended his hand. Welcome. They built a second cabin across the stream. Thomas set up a forge, simple but functional. The ring of his hammer on the anvil became the heartbeat of the valley. Others came. Carlos and Rosa Morales, an elderly Mexican couple whose sheep had been scattered by cattle barons. They brought their flock 12 animals that provided wool and milk, and eventually meat. Silent John arrived next, a prospector, half mad from mercury poisoning. He couldn't string 3 words together anymore, but he could find water in stone. He walked the valley with a forked stick, showing them where to dig for springs. Then came Red Deer Woman, a Lakota widow with 2 children. Her husband had died on the reservation, starved by corrupt Indian agents who sold their food rations for profit. She was a hunter, skilled with bow and rifle both. 7 families by the end of the first year. 23 souls who had been cast out by the world, who had found each other in this high valley where no law reached. They helped each other survive. Thomas forged tools. Carlos predicted weather. Rosa made cheese. Red Deer Woman brought in game. Sarah taught the children to read using a battered Bible in her own careful hand. And Kai, the quiet Apache warrior, became something he'd never expected to be. A leader. Not through force or proclamation, but through example. When a cabin needed raising, he was the first to lift a log. When meat was scarce, he took the youngest hunters into the forest and taught them to track. When disputes arose, he listened with patience and spoke with wisdom. The secret the second winter came hard and fast. Snow piled to the eaves of the cabins. The temperature dropped to 20 below. They survived on stored food and rationed game, huddled around fires while the wind screamed outside. It was in February, during the worst of the cold, that Sarah realized she'd missed her monthly courses. Twice now. Her breasts were tender. She felt nauseous in the mornings, though it passed by noon. She sat by the fire one evening, watching Kai clean his rifle. The familiar motions, oil and cloth, and patient care. She gathered her courage. Kai, I think I'm with child. His hand stopped moving. For 5 seconds, he didn't breathe. When he looked up, his face was unreadable. Are you certain? No. But all the signs. She touched her belly. I think so. Kai set down the rifle. Stood. Walked to the door, opened it despite the cold. Stood there looking out at the snow-covered valley. Sarah's heart sank. She'd hoped for joy, for excitement. Instead, she saw his back rigid with tension. Say something, she whispered. He turned. His face was wet. Not from snow. I lost a daughter once, he said, when I couldn't protect her. When I failed. He crossed the room, knelt before Sarah, placed his hands on her belly. If I lose another child, I will not survive it. You won't lose this one. Sarah covered his hands with hers. We have Grace, who's birthed 2 babies. We have Rosa, who's midwife dozens. We have Red Deer Woman and her medicines. This baby will live. How can you promise that? Sarah pulled his head against her chest, felt his tears soak through her dress. Because 18 months ago you were dead inside. I brought you back to life. This baby isn't death's child. It's life's answer to death. Kai held her, then held her, and the promise of the child within. And for the first time since Bitter Springs, he wept. Not silently, not hidden, but openly, letting the grief and the fear and the desperate hope pour out. They would have a child. They would build a family. They would prove that from pain and iron and cruelty, something beautiful could still grow. The teacher, as winter melted into spring, Sarah's belly swelled. The baby kicked strongly, a fighter from the start. The women of the valley rallied around her. Grace shared her knowledge. Rosa brewed special teas. Red Deer Woman gathered herbs that would ease labor and prevent infection. But it was Samuel who became Kai's shadow. Thomas's 9-year-old son followed Kai everywhere. To the forest when he checked snares. To the stream when he fished. To the high meadow when he hunted deer. The boy was silent, watchful, absorbing everything. One morning, Kai handed him a bow. Not a toy, but a real weapon scaled to his size. He spent the morning teaching Samuel to shoot. Breathe out slowly. Kai stood behind the boy, guiding his stance. Let the arrow fly between heartbeats. Samuel released. The arrow flew 20 yards, stuck quivering in a pine stump. Good. Again. They practiced for an hour. When Samuel could hit the stump 8 times out of 10, Kai sat him down on a fallen log. Samuel, you know why I teach you these things? To hunt. Kai shook his head. To survive. But survival isn't just about taking life. It's about knowing when to take it and when to spare it. He pulled a skinning knife, held it up to catch the light. A strong man protects the weak. That's what makes him strong. Not his muscles, not his weapons. His choices. Samuel nodded solemnly. Like you protected Sarah from those bad men, yes. And like you'll protect people someday. Because I'm teaching you to be a man who can be trusted with strength. The lessons continued. Not just hunting, but tracking. Fire making. Reading weather. Finding water. The 1,000 small skills that meant the difference between life and death in the wilderness. But more than that, Kai taught values. Honesty, loyalty, the importance of keeping one's word. These things couldn't be demonstrated in an afternoon. They had to be lived day after day until they became part of the boy's bones. Thomas noticed. He pulled Kai aside one evening while Samuel was practicing his knots. Thank you, Thomas's voice was rough with emotion. For teaching my boy, for treating him like he matters. He does matter. In Kansas, the white folks looked at him like he was dirt. A thing, not a person. Here you look at him and see a man he could become. Kai glanced at Samuel, working the rope with patient concentration. That's because he is becoming a man, and men need teachers. One afternoon, Samuel asked a question that stopped Kai mid-stride. Teacher, if a man hurts someone you love, is it right to kill him? Kai looked at the boy, saw Thomas's intelligence in those eyes, but also a child's need for clear answers in an unclear world. He knelt, bringing himself to Samuel's level. Tell me why you ask. Samuel's gaze dropped to his feet. I heard Mama and Papa talking about the man who hurt Sarah, about how you and the old Apache killed him. Kai took a breath. Killing is never right, Samuel, but sometimes it is necessary, like cutting off a finger to save a hand. He placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. The man who hurt Sarah was like a mad dog. He would not stop. He would hurt more people. So we stopped him, not from hate, from protection. But how do you know? Samuel's voice was small. How do you know when it's necessary? Kai stood, looked out at the valley. You ask yourself 3 questions. First, is there another way? Second, am I protecting someone who cannot protect themselves? Third, can I live with the choice? After he met Samuel's eyes? If the first answer is no, and the other 2 are yes, then you act. But you never forget. Every life you take, even a bad one, leaves a mark. Samuel nodded slowly. Processing. Will you always have marks, teacher? Yes, but the marks remind me why I fight. Not for anger, for the people I love. He thought of his own father, who had taught him to hunt, to fight, to survive, who had died defending their people from Mexican soldiers when Kai was 16. The legacy a father left wasn't land or gold. It was knowledge, wisdom, the tools to build a good life. Now Kai was passing that legacy forward. Not to his own blood son, not yet, but to Samuel, who needed it just as badly. The afternoon August came hot and bright. Sarah was 8 months along, her belly enormous. She moved slowly, carefully, one hand always supporting her back. The baby was positioned low, pressing it on her pelvis with uncomfortable weight. She sat in the doorway of the cabin, shelling beans into a clay bowl. Her legs forced wide to accommodate her pregnancy, spread in a posture that would have brought shame months ago. But now, looking down at herself, she began to laugh. Kai was repairing fence near the garden. He heard her laughter, looked up with concern. "What's wrong?" Sarah gestured to herself, her enormous belly, her spread legs. "Come here, look at me." He walked over, knelt before her. "I'm looking." She took his hand, placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" The baby kicked a strong thump against his palm. "I can't close my legs," Sarah said. Her voice trembled between laughter and tears. "I can't close them at all." Kai's face showed confusion, then understanding. This time Sarah continued, "It's not shame, it's not iron, it's not punishment." She pressed his hand harder against her belly. "It's life." Kai looked at her spread legs, at the scars on her ankles, faded now to silver white, at the enormous curve of her belly, taut with the child growing inside. He thought of the woman he'd found in the desert, broken and dying, thought of the journey that had brought them here. "Unbelievable," he whispered. Sarah covered his hand with both of hers. "Not shame," she said. "Life." "Life," Kai repeated. The word hung between them, full of promise and hope and defiant joy. They had survived. Against all odds, against Clayton and the desert and the cruelty of the world, they had survived. And now they would do more than survive. They would build. They would grow. They would create something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. 2 years later, the sun set over the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Kai sat on the porch. He'd built his son Nathan on his lap. The boy was 2 years old, sturdy and curious, with his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair. Nathan grabbed at his father's face, small fingers exploring. Kai smiled, caught the hand, kissed the chubby fingers. His heart, dead for so long, was full almost to bursting. Sarah stood in the garden, one hand on her swollen belly. 5 months, along with their second child. The corn stood tall around her, the beans climbed their stalks, the squash spread their broad leaves in the rich soil, what they'd built from Ruth's seeds and backbreaking labor. The valley had grown. 9 families now, 32 souls. Children's laughter echoed from the cluster of cabins. Smoke rose from Thomas's forge. Rose's sheep called to each other in the gathering dusk. Samuel, now 11, was practicing with his bow in the meadow. Kai watched with pride as the boy hit target after target, solid, steady, becoming a man. Nathan squirmed, wanting down. Kai set him on the porch. The boy toddled toward his mother, arms outstretched. Sarah scooped him up, kissed his dark hair, carried him back to where Kai sat. She settled beside him, Nathan between them. The 3 of them, soon to be 4. A family. "You were right," Sarah said quietly, "about this place, about building something from nothing. We built it together." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're not safe, not really. The world still hates us. Towns still fear us. Soldiers still patrol. But we have each other," Kai said. "And that's enough. More than enough." They sat in silence, watching the light fade. In the distance, a hawk cried its hunting song. The corn rustled in the evening breeze. From Thomas's cabin came the sound of Grace singing her a rich voice, carrying the old hymns. Nathan, fighting sleep, curled against his father's chest. Kai wrapped his arms around his son, felt a small heartbeat against his own. Thought of all the things he would teach this boy. How to track, how to hunt, how to build. But more than that, how to be honorable. How to protect the weak. How to stand between the ones you love and every danger the world can throw. "Tell him," Sarah said. "Tell him the story." Kai looked down at his drowsy son. "When you're older, little one," he said softly, "I'll tell you how your mother and I found each other. How we were both dying in different ways. How the desert tried to kill us and failed." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'll tell you about the barn and the iron, about the chase through the mountains and the battle at the Apache camp, about building this valley with our own hands. And I'll tell you the most important part." "What's that?" Sarah asked, though she knew. "That from the worst pain can come the greatest joy. That broken things can heal. that a man who thinks he's dead can learn to live again. He kissed the top of Nathan's head. The boy's eyes had closed, his breathing deep and even. And I'll tell you that you, Nathan, are the proof. You are life's answer to death, hope's answer to despair. You are everything your mother and I fought for. Sarah wiped her eyes. Her free hand found Kai's, their fingers intertwining. Below them, the valley settled into night. Fires winked to life in cabin windows. The stream murmured its endless song. Somewhere an owl called, hunting the darkness. They sat there as the stars emerged one by one, filling the sky with light. A man, a woman, a child. A family built from pain and iron and unbreakable will. Kai had come to this valley wanting to die. Now holding his son sitting beside his wife, who carried their second child, he understood that life was not about avoiding pain. It was about choosing again and again to keep building in spite of it. The world beyond the valley was still cruel, still unjust, still filled with men like Clayton Gable who took pleasure in breaking others. But here in this hidden place, they had created something else, a community of cast-offs and survivors. A place where Apache and Black and Mexican and white could live without fear. Where strength meant protecting the weak, not preying on them. It wasn't much. 9 families in a mountain valley that most maps didn't show. But it was real. It was theirs. And it would endure. Nathan stirred, murmured something in his sleep. Kai held him closer. Tomorrow there would be work. Fences to mend, corn to harvest, children to teach. The endless labor of survival. But tonight there was only this. The weight of his son in his arms. The warmth of his wife beside him. The stars wheeling overhead in their ancient dance. For tonight and all the nights to come, it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.